Good evening, everybody. My name is Brendan Baylott. I'm the president of the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeology Association. Um, Welcome, everybody. Give it a couple minutes for people to join. Tonight, I'm here to present our next installment of our three-part series titled Milwaukee Underwater. Tonight, the program will focus on the survey work that we did over the last few years in Milwaukee's Menomonee River Valley, and specifically the canals, the Burnham, the South Menomonee Canal. And we'll review some of the things that we found on the bottom. I'm going to just give it another minute for people to join before we get going on our program. All right. So it's going to be a little bit longer program tonight, simply because there was a lot more bottom to cover in the Menominee. I could have almost split it into two programs, but we'll try to make it fit. I see we get some people starting to join. You can feel free to type questions if you want to in the chat as we go. I will try to answer them if I'm able to as we go. All right. So without further ado, let's start tonight's program. First of all, for those of you who didn't see last week's program, a little bit about me and about WUA. The WUAA is a citizen science organization that was founded about 35 years ago in partnership with the State Historical Society of Wisconsin's Maritime Archaeology Program. It was originally conceived as an auxiliary group of interested citizens and sport divers who would help the state survey the many hundreds of shipwrecks that the state ended up inheriting as a result of the Abandoned Shipwreck Act of 1987. But pretty quickly, we branched out into inland sites, riparian sites, Native American sites, and generally helping both state and tribal organizations to survey their sites. So that's a kind of what we do now. We're also partnering now with the new Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary and the Wisconsin Maritime Museum to help them. A little bit more about some of the things that I do. You may know me through my book, Fathoms Deep but Not Forgotten Wisconsin's Lost Ships, which is a compendium of all the vessels ever built or lost in southeastern Wisconsin. And for those of you who don't have a copy, I'm going to be reprinting it as a Kindle Direct book in the near future, so watch for that. Um, Also, this past summer, my partner Bob Jake and I located the remains of the historic schooner Trinidad off of Algoma. You may have seen that. So we do a fair amount of that type of remote sensing. This is us at Milwaukee. So why did we choose to side scan the bottom of all of Milwaukee's harbor and rivers? I mean, that was quite a bit of work. We burned a lot of gas. We took up a bunch of our weekends. Um, Part of the reason is that Milwaukee's harbor and waterfront and rivers are changing due to regentrification. What were once industrial sites and come somewhat unseemly with a lot of toxic waste are starting to become targets for condominium builders. You see a lot of kayakers and paddleboarders on the river now, and a lot of the archaeological sites have somewhat been overlooked. And people are unaware that a lot of Milwaukee's industrial history is still on the bottom of those rivers and canals. So we'll talk about that, and we're going to take a tour of it today and see what lies beneath. Um, One of the risks, though, is that right underneath that biological mat on the bottom of the rivers is a lot of industrial pollutants from everything from the tanneries to the old coal plants that were back there that took delivery of coal from the eastern lakes. Um, so a number of surveys have been done, but I don't think anybody's ever surveyed the whole complex. I think the main one was the Burnham Canal was surveyed for regentrification with side scanning sonar, similar to what we've done. Some of the other problems with having done this in the past are that the visibility is very poor in the river, so it's not something that scuba divers can readily see. So side scan sonar is an ideal tool for imaging what's on the bottom. And the technology has improved greatly. You're going to see, if you didn't see our last one, that we had amazing seeing on the Menomonee. and on its canals. The visibility, the acoustical seeing was great because the water was fairly still and there was very low turbidity. So we really had excellent results. We used Deep Vision Little Eye, which is a sonar that's made by Deep Vision Technologies in Sweden. And the Little Eye is their small portable model. It is higher frequency and it shoots the bottom at much higher resolution. I can bring the beam right into like 20, 30 feet per channel if I want to and really get some detail. This is what I carry it in here. And this is the little boat we used, so we were able to get way up the rivers without too much trouble. So this is kind of what we did. I'm going to go ahead and go off camera here. We surveyed this whole area. What you're going to see, and just to give you guys, to orient you, the river that goes up to the north is the Milwaukee River. Going down off the screen on the bottom is the Kinnickinnick River, which I did last week. And then coming out to the west is the Menomonee River. And the Menomonee is this longer river on the north side here that you see that kind of loops to the south. We are on the left of your screen. Coming down perpendicular off of it is what we call the South Menomonee Canal. And then coming even further south is what's known as the Burnham Canal. There used to be a fourth canal to the north of the Menomonee River up here called the Neeland Canal, which was filled in around the turn of the century. We were not able to scan the extreme end of the Burnham Canal because the bridge does not allow you under, but also the canal has become very filled in by vegetation and is now being turned into a marshland intentionally. So this is the area that you can see that we scanned, and I'm going to take you through most of it tonight. You'll be able to see some interesting things on the bottom. That's a little bit better view of the Deep Vision Little Eye. It's very portable. I've used this to scan river bottoms in as little as 3 feet of water with good result. It plugs right into my laptop. It records onto the laptop and lets me mosaic the bottoms onto it. So here I am deploying it off of the Dawn Treader with the State Historical Society. All right. So the Menomonee River in Milwaukee, as you can see, was once a massive industrial site. This is the Menomonee River itself, and there was a lot of coal terminals on that river. This is about 1910, and you get a pretty good idea of just how many vessels there would be there loading and unloading at any one time. This is an original postcard from my collection. It's tremendous, a tremendous amount of vessel traffic, and I will say, though, that the canals have been dredged since then, but not much and not often. So a lot of the debris is still down there. This is the South Menomonee Canal, where it turns, the right on the left of this image would be today's modern-day Harley-Davidson Museum. This is known as the Menomonee River Boneyard. And a lot of old schooners were taken up there and abandoned. And so one of our objectives in doing this scan was to see if we could see any remains from any of these old vessels that were abandoned there. This is also from the original stereo view, an H.H. Bennett stereo view from 1884. All right. I'm going to go ahead and load up a few more images because I wanted to show you some of the other historical uses that the river has had over the years before I dive into the side scan imagery. So I think you're going to enjoy these. Let's see. Yeah, and there we go. So a lot of people aren't aware that the river was the scene of a lot of shipbuilding, and I'll put that up so you can see it. So this is what the Menomonee Valley looked like in these canals around 1870 or so. And what you see here is pretty much, the river with a few changes. You can see that there was a great marsh in here, and they built this land up with the dredgings they removed from the canal. What I've circled here is where the Menomonee River Boneyard was. It was in this bend of the river that you see up to your left. You can see the river comes straight in, and this was the Neeland Canal up here to the right, which has been filled in, and then the Menomonee itself comes back all the way. This little cut through is no longer there. Here you can see the present day South Menomonee Canal. It's been straightened, and then the Burnham is down here. This little loop is what was known as the Boneyard. This little loop has been filled in, and this is where the ships were. We think today that this is under a park or a parking lot by Right Height Corporation. The exact location of those old hulls would be about right here. So it might be an interesting study for ground penetrating radar at some point. But all right. This is a view from a stereo view in my collection of that grain elevator taken from that bend in the river. Here you see a three-masted barkentine by the name of the Tanner, which wrecked in Milwaukee Harbor later. Here, unloading or loading grain. One of the things that a lot of people aren't aware is there was a major shipyard there in the Menomonee River Valley during World War One. During World War One, fabricated shipbuilding was very quickly put together by Newton Engineering and Coddington Engineering for government contracts to build big World War II vessels, and they built many of them there. And today there's debris on the bottom in that area, which we think is probably associated with the historic shipyard. I don't think they've dredged that area since then. This is a map showing the river in 1916, about just before they built that big shipyard. The shipyard was right here on the Menomonee River, right between the Menomonee River and the Neeland Canal, which is now filled in. This is where the shipyard was, where they launched the ships. And you're going to see there's debris in there. Likewise, you can see all the different slips that were once there that have since been filled in for all the different businesses. This is where all the coal docks were. Milwaukee Electric Power Company was up here. And there's a lot of debris associated with that. You can see they filled in the Boneyard slip. That is long gone. It's underneath where those railroad tracks are shown. And here's the Burnham Canal. And you can see this is where a lot of the big businesses were. The creamstone brick companies were here. Pfister and Vogel Tannery had a big plant here. And so, again, this area is probably fairly contaminated underneath the bottom, but interesting view of what the harbor looked like back then. Also, the historic shipyards, there were many of them. You can see a number of the yards were in the 1800s were right there at the confluence of the river. The Allen and McClellan shipyard was there, and also Ellsworth and Davidson and B.B. Jones. They were all right at that confluence. And then there was, of course, some yards out here by Jones Island, but you can see the big concentration of shipyards there. This is an actual photo of one of the big vessels, I think it was a mine layer, the General John P. Story, being launched in the Menomonee Canal in 1920, just after World War One. This gives you a good view. There were some big, big ships that were launched there. All right. So that's all the history, I think, that'll help you understand what we're looking at as we go up the canal. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the view of what we're going to watch tonight. Okay. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to go ahead and start the tour of what we saw. All right, so you can see there's a lot of tracks. The first one we're going to look at here, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see where we're going to be. I'm going to turn on the first track. The first track takes us right from the Menomonee River entrance here and takes us by the Harley-Davidson Museum. We start to go up the South Menomonee Canal. So we're going to go ahead and play that back. Now, one of the things you're going to see here is that the seeing is very good. For those of you who haven't seen a side scan sonar image before, I want to explain this a little bit first. The middle is where the towfish is, right? And there's these bright lines just to the left and right. That is the acoustic ping that the towfish puts out, hitting the surface of the water up here. And then down on the bottom where you see it, this dark, that's the water column. These little white flecks in the water column are debris that's in the water column, probably small fish. And then on the bottom, this is where it hits the bottom of the lake. And then everything else here is the bottom of the river. And everything else here is the river bottom that you see. Now on the right, you see these white little blobs, these white little hard squares that seem to be suspended. This is a dock. And so anytime you see that sort of thing, that's usually hard return. And then, of course, here we hit the side of the river. That's the river bank, and just sort of comes up from there. And occasionally, you'll see some echoes of hard things on either channel. So let's watch. We'll play this as we go through. This plume here, just for those of you who didn't see the last one, is a boat wake. This is from a propeller of a boat, and it agitates the water, and because it changes the water's density, it shows up on the acoustical ping. All right. So as we play back, you're going to see one thing right here. You're going to see an echo from the revetment on the other side of the water here. This object here, you may be tempted to think that that's a thing on the bottom. It's actually a boat going by, and the sonar actually registered its hull because its hull came fairly deep into the water. But as you can see, we can see the bottom of the river just perfectly. I mean, we're really seeing excellent detail. And it's pretty clean, honestly. It gets flushed out from time to time, and doesn't leave a whole lot on the bottom on that outer part of the river. You can see a little bit of debris here as we start to get into the river. Some larger objects along the shore here, probably just dredgings that have been left up on the shore or up on the top here. You can see there's a bit of a drop off there where it comes up. Again, we've got a boat propeller here, but there are some things on the bottom. A couple little logs here. This is another boat on the surface there. This is a bridge. As we go under the big bridge right here for the freeway system. And you're going to see there's some debris on the bottom here. There usually is off bridges. It's usually stuff that people have thrown. These are the dolphins that protect the bridge from ships hitting them. And here you can see a bunch of debris on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and magnify that just so you can see that debris. We don't know what it is. It's probably not of a tremendous interest. But you can see there's some detritus there that's just north of the dolphin underneath the bridge. Probably things that have fallen off the bridge over the years. All right, let's continue on. We're coming up the river again. Pretty clean bottom. Some things that are down there, but not too much. You can see that it's a little bit darker on the bottom. It's because of the vegetative mat that's down there. All right, let's stop right here. This is something on the bottom. We think that it is the remains of a vessel, a pretty large object that's on the bottom over here. This is just past the main bridge here with the freeway system, and right in the South Menomonee Canal. There's an object that sticks up into the water column here. This is off about like a condominium building today, and it is we don't know what it is. It's rather large. It sticks up off the bottom. We don't think it's just discarded debris. We're going to show you that on the way back in. So that's a major target that we'd like to know more about. All right, we continue on up the river here, and we'll come to the end pretty soon. And you can see that otherwise it's fairly nondescript in the South Menomonee. We've got a little area of debris here that is old docks, we think, and an old caisson for an old dock. And again, these are things that would be very difficult to scuba dive because the visibility is so low. Here's an interesting object. So we think we see this twice. We see it on our way back too. It's a fairly large object laying on the bottom. It sticks up a ways. I'm going to magnify it. We don't have much of an idea of what it is. It is not shaped like a vessel. It could be a decaying barge that's flipped over upside down. In terms of its size, it is about 30 feet long. So we think it could be something significant, but we just don't know. Be interesting to check that out. continuing along. By the way, I cannot see your comments if you're posting just because I'm busy running this. So I will look back after this, after a few tracks. And you can see again a lot of other debris along the right side of the river here, revetment from a dock. But otherwise, you know, not a terrible amount of material. Something here on the left, maybe a big log. And here we are kind of back where we started. Um, so kind of an interesting one. I'm going to take a quick look at that object that we saw on the bottom. Now, one of the things that when we start out here, we see on the right, which is sort of interesting, is that we think this might be a historic vessel, some historic vessel remains. It's right on the tip here of the isthmus that's formed by the Burnham and the Menomonee, right near the Harley-Davidson Museum. We saw this several times, this big object, wooden object that seems fairly long coming out of the side. And if we measure it distance-wise, it's something in the neighborhood of, 70, 80 feet long, and it's embedded in the bottom there. And we wondered if that's not a hull. And you can see it sticks up into the water column. It's got a lot of associated debris that's been laid over it. And you can see, I'm going to play it back after I come up the river here, and you can see it in greater detail. But I am going to go past the item that we thought was a shipwreck one more time up in the South Menomonee. Should come up here any moment on the side. You can see a little bit more texture on the right, some debris that's been dumped. And some of this is probably stuff that's been dumped off of barges, perhaps. Here's that object we thought was possibly a capsized barge. You can see it on the right now. And it shows up almost the same as it did on the previous pass. It's kind of interesting. We're actually seeing a little bit better on this pass down. Here's a large piece of debris on the right that was associated with that dock complex that I showed you earlier. And here's the debris again that we see from what we think is a shipwreck. So, all right. We'll take you on one last tour of the debris at the point. And you can see it again right here. Kind of interesting that we think that's a ship. All right. Here's another view of it. We ran it right over this time. And again, we don't think it's intact. We just think it's a broken hull that's been somewhat buried. Another view of it. All right. Let's take a look up the Burnham Canal. The Burnham Canal was quite interesting. I'll just tell you. Here's our track as we came up towards the Burnham Canal. All right, so we entered, and the Burnham Canal is fairly narrow. There's debris on the bottom, a fair amount of industrial debris. On the left, you can see several pieces that are not associated with bridges, and you can see a fair amount of stuff on the right side. And lo and behold, we run over this huge object sitting on the bottom of the left side of the Burnham Canal, and we thought right away that it looked like a fish tug. Measured distance-wise, it's something in the neighborhood of about, I'm a little off there, but 40 feet. And it stands up a good 10 feet off the bottom. So definitely an object on the bottom right there as you come up the Burnham Canal. I'm going to show you a couple other views of it. It was very bright and reflective, so it's made of metal, whatever it is. Well, I know what it is. I'll tell you in a bit. So let's take another view of that. Give you a close-up of where it is. It's right here in this little area. That's it again. You can see how hard it is. It actually echoes back a couple of times. And it's a pretty good size object. You can see there's a bunch of debris near there that we think is industrial in nature that's just been dumped. But yeah, pretty substantial object on the bottom. Give you another series of views of it. You can see it there, not such a clean view. That's a weird view that we got from like the stern of it, looking up it. Then here's another view that makes it where it looks sort of like a fish tug. One of the things that we later learned is that about a year after we scanned the river, the DNR came in and also had done a scan preparatory to the Burnham Canal project. and they also located this. The State Historical Society found an aerial view that showed a fish tug moored exactly there one day, and the next month it was gone. And so we believe that's a fish tug that sunk there. And I think that's been confirmed. I believe that divers may have already gone down on it, and so we located that. I think in maybe 4 years ago when we did this scan. We suspected a fish tug, but we didn't know for sure. So it's since been confirmed, I think, to be one. All right, let's move along. Let's take track 30 here. This is our reciprocal run coming back. And this is a run where we found a very significant object on the bottom. I'm just going to stop right here and show it to you. It's on the right. It is just about after you go under the bridge from the freeway. There were a number of boats parked over it, so we weren't able to get in there and get a good view. But you can see this is a fairly substantial object on the bottom. We think it's a vessel. I'm going to go ahead and play this. You can see it as it comes into view. Here's a pretty large object on the bottom standing up as we come up the Burnham. You can see all the revetment. A lot of this area of the river is protected with steel revetment. And here it is, right at the end on the right. Very substantial piece of debris. This is also an interesting object here. This thing stands up a good 4 or 5 feet off the bottom, and I'm not sure what it is. I'm going to blow that up because just odd how it's just it's a standing object on the bottom. It's sitting up at least 5 feet, I think, off the bottom. There it is. That would be worth looking at. I doubt it's like a boat or anything of that nature, but it certainly is a large thing, maybe industrial debris. I'm going to go ahead and measure its height off the bottom. So yeah, I think it's almost in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 feet high, whatever it is. Interesting object. All right, let's continue along. About halfway through, that's good. I'm making a pretty good time. I'm going to show you some more close-ups of that debris that we found. So this is another view of it, and you can see exactly where it is in this. It's right off this building here. It's a fairly large object. We think it's a vessel. We think that this is a vessel hull. It's a little distorted here because we were turning slightly as we went by. Here's another view of it over here on the right. You can see again, it's a little distorted and a little turned, but it seems to us like it may be a vessel. And then we have another really good view of it, I think, here in this one. Oh, yeah, that's it. Okay. All right. So then we came back up the river. I'll play that run. I don't think we found too much here. Here you can see some stuff on the bottom just before the bridge. You can see that same debris under the bridge as we come back out. So that was the South Menomonee and the Burnham Canal that we toured there. And there's a lot there. I mean, we found a couple of very interesting objects. We found at least what I would consider to be 3 potential shipwrecks. One that we know for sure is, 2 that we suspect strongly are, and then some industrial debris that we found quite interesting and would like to potentially look at again. One of the ways we could do that is with a drop camera with an infrared light emitter, infrared diodes. That would enable us to see it more clearly. As you come down the river here, one of the things that it's going a little fast. We found a number of kayaks on the bottom, which I'm going to see if I can spot it as we go. I don't think it's in this run here. We didn't see much there. So let's move on. We're going to go up the Menomonee River next in number 34 here. So you can kind of see where this is going. It just goes up the first leg of the Menomonee. And again, the seeing here was tremendous. You can just see every texture, every pit on the bottom. And we're running at 150 feet per channel, and really about 75 feet of river only per channel. Here you can see a bunch of interesting texture on the bottom here, around the area of the bridge that goes under the road there. A lot of stuff that's been thrown or dumped off the bridge, I think. None of it really piqued our interest per se. We wondered about this. One of the things that you often wonder about when you look at these things is if there's any bodies down there. If there were, they don't stay intact long and they wash out. Um, but it's what you would expect that you'd see a lot if it was a common thing. But we didn't see anything that we thought looked like a body. So, all right, let's move along. Okay, this is our main run up the Menomonee River right here. This is a long run. I forgot to shut the track off, so you get to see it both ways, the up and the reciprocal. And this was interesting. So buckle up. Here we go. I believe we may have imaged a kayak in here. I'm trying to. I know we had it marked. I had it marked, and I was wanting to show you, and I couldn't find it again. But there's a pretty good view of a kayak in here. There's something on the bottom here on the left channel with a little pointy bow, but it's under the mug pretty well. We continue up the river, and you can see there's some very good texture. It's just very visible. The seeing is excellent. Here's some caissons on the left for a bridge. We keep coming up. It was quite a long run, I should add, to go all the way up the Menomonee. And the Menomonee, this is where, remember, where all those vessels were docked and all those coal facilities were. It's also where the shipyard was. The fabricated shipyard was in here. And so we were seeing debris that we felt might have been from the fabricated yard, fabricated shipbuilding from around the World War I period. Okay, here we are coming under the, I think, the freeway bridge here. And again, usually you see a lot of debris like this when you come up past the bridge. The Neeland Canal used to go up that way, and that's been filled in. I did not see any debris associated with the entrance to the Neeland Canal. We checked that a couple of times. Here are a couple of bright objects that I think were boat hulls that were docked here, and they were picked up. I'm going to stop here. This looks like a little boat. So I'm not sure if that's what I thought was a kayak. Let's see. Don't think that is the object that I thought was a kayak, but oh, sorry. Zoom. Huh. It stands up off the bottom quite a bit, and it's pointy. My suspicion is that it's a small boat, pretty short, maybe 6 to 8 feet. Small kayak, maybe something like that. All right, let's continue on. I know I saw at least 2 or 3 kayaks on the bottom because it is pretty popular for kayakers. A little bit of debris here in the left channel on the bottom, probably just industrial waste and debris from things falling off of boats over the years. There's an object on the left here, up near right off this point of riprap, pretty significant, maybe 4 or 5 feet. Now here's something on the bottom. And again, this to me falls in again into that paddleboard or kayak category. It stands up pretty well. It's probably about 6 feet long. It could be a log too, but it's pretty big and it's gouged out of the bottom, and it's got a pretty bright signature. Hard to tell. It could be sitting on its side, or there are not a lot of logs that run down here for reference. So otherwise, you'd be seeing more of that type of debris. Here's something on the right, big feature on the bottom. Not sure what that is. There's definitely something coming out there. I doubt that it's a vessel of any kind. All right, we continue up and we run on into this big thing here, which is somewhat interesting. It looks to me like a big piece of the shore has collapsed. So what we notice here, we're near that Milwaukee Electric Light historic location, and I actually found an article about the collapse of their shoreline here off of the side. So I think that's what that is. Some more debris off to the side here. We continue up, and then we have this. This really got me and Bob quite excited. This thing on the right. We thought for sure we had a big barge here that had been sunk because there were a lot of coal barges that came up here for the Milwaukee Electric Light Company. One of the things that, and we were really excited about it. We ran by this a dozen times probably. But what kind of clued us in as to what this was when I got home and measured it. It's about 170 feet long, maybe give or take. That's too long to be anything like that. And I think it's very similar to what we see down here. I think it's another piece of collapsed shoreline. They had a big, kind of man-made area here where they had, poured concrete and made a big concrete, pier. And I think it just broke off because it got undermined. That's my supposition on it. So unfortunately, it's not a large barge like we thought. It is a piece of collapsed pier or shoreline, I mean. So now we're heading up the rest of the way through the area. Here you see an underwater pipe, which is quite interesting, that goes across towards you where you get to the end of the Menomonee. Up here in the end of the Menomonee, there is a historic fish tug hull shown on the map, on the charts from about 1945. We looked for it pretty diligently up here. Now we're towards the end of it. We're making our turn to go back. There's a pipeline going under right here that you can see. We did not see that fish tug hull, so we think it's been removed. And we would have seen it. We were looking in pretty reasonably high resolution. So we're going to make the return trip, and let's see, doing good on time. Again, here's the pipeline coming across. You can see that. It's mostly submerged on the right. All right, and that's the end of that. 36 is a close-up of what we thought was the barge. There it is again. And you can really see, I think, a little more clearly that it's not. But here's some debris on the right that's, again, fairly small. Another close-up of what we thought was the barge. And you can see we shot it a bunch of times at different angles before we really realized that this was just a big piece of concrete revetment that had fallen off. All right. Let's take a look at number 41 here. This is our reciprocal pass back. We're going to play this one next. All right. And you can see we took this all the way out of the harbor. And then there's just one more thing after this to view and we'll be done. Again, the river bottom is cleaner than you might think. Here's some little debris, again, small objects. This is that same piece we ran over, verifying that it's still there on the just on the left. I think it's probably a small kayak. Here's an object on the right that we didn't quite image on our way down. Maybe we were just at a disadvantage on it with geometry. But you can see that it definitely has some height to it. Bring it up on the zoom. You see those vertical lines there? Those interest me. I wonder if those are drag lines of some sort. I don't know what this object is. There are two pieces of it. It strikes me that it could be a piece of a barge or something like that that's deteriorated. It's about 25 feet long, I'd say. Interesting object. Continuing up the river, we'll go by a few of these other industrial sites, and we'll also get closer to the Fabricated Shipbuilding Corporation site. Now, here's an object that's quite interesting. This thing is really sticking up off the bottom. I'm going to zoom that for you. It's associated with a smaller debris field on the inside. So you can see the Menomonee definitely has stuff on the bottom that have been. Oh wait, I'm not zooming. That have been dumped there or lost there. This is an object that I'd like to check out. Again, it's one of those objects that stands up really high. I think that is what I thought was a kayak. I believe that's my kayak target because you can see the two pointed ends on it. Let's go ahead and measure that. Yeah, about a 16 footer or a canoe, or a small boat. I'm pretty sure we've got ourselves a little kayak there. Certainly does cast a nice shadow. Continuing on up the Menomonee, our reciprocal path, we come under I think this is the main freeway bridge here. I think we're that far. Again, we've got some debris, some places where things have been dumped. These were mostly dredged to project depth by the Corps of Engineers, but not all of it was. In these areas near the shore where you see debris weren't necessarily dredged. There's also a lot of places where there are exhausts of like water coming out of like different plants, and they cause a little bit of problem on the bottom, a little disturbance to the bottom texture. Like here on the left is probably a good example where there's a water discharge. Here's an object that's really small on the right. You see that. That's definitely a block of something sitting on the bottom there in the right channel. Be interesting to drop a camera on these. And again, when Bob and I were there, our intent wasn't to ground truth anything. Our intent was to map. So we have the data for what the bottom looked like, at this time. Here you can see some more objects on the bottom. So it gives you targets, that if you wanted to come back and look at them, you could, to see what was there at the time. So that's really our intent here, is to create a point in time inventory of what was on the bottom and what it looked like. Here's another object over to the right that's probably could be a little sunken boat of some sort, lost off of somebody's mooring or something. Continuing on down, another object laying on the bottom that's really small there. But yeah, it would have been one of those things that if we had a drop camera, we would have been there we'd have never finished the project. We'd have been sitting there putting the camera down all the time. And you just don't get any work done that way. Here the dolphins are. For this bridge, this is the main, I believe, this main swing bridge that brings you out. If I remember right, we should see another kayak on the bottom. It's pretty clearly a kayak. All right. The river breaks away around the turn here as we come out. Seeing some of the same objects we saw on the way in. Little pieces of debris on the bottom. Here we come up to the last bridge. Again, more pieces of debris associated with the bridge. The revetment certainly does echo. Okay, this is interesting. I wanted to show you guys this. There are deep holes in the bottom here, and I'm curious about what these could be from. They are probably maybe from dredging or a spud dredge that sunk spuds into the bottom there. I'm not sure what that would have been. You can see there's docks here. I can't. We're down here, kind of in the outer harbor. Definitely something put some deep pock marks in the bottom there. We see that in areas that have been dredged. We're coming out now into the main area of the river where there's a lot of vessel traffic. So we were being kind of cagey. The bottom gets really busy out here too. Also somewhat more interesting, but there was just a lot of vessel traffic out here. So flying our fish was a bit dodgy. The seeing also wasn't quite as good out here as it was up in the canals because the river is much substantially deeper here. But you can see we don't have a whole lot at the bottom out here. I thought we had a kayak. Here's something on the bottom of the right channel. Big piece of debris here as we get to the outer harbor. Stands up quite a bit. It looks just like a piece of, I'm not sure what that is. That would be interesting to drop a camera on. It's right underneath the bridge. So it would be underneath one of these bridges as we come out of the river. There's a fairly large object down there. Makes you wonder sometimes if these things are old cars or something that are starting to get buried. We found one of those in Kenosha under a bridge. So here we are. We had some mud on the bottom, harder mud. This is an object that's standing right off the bottom. It's like a log or a boom or of some sort. You can see its shadow that it's casting here. And it's, a good long piece. It's like 30 feet long. These white flecks on the right are dock caissons. There's a bunch of piers sticking out there. But you can see the bottom in here gets pretty busy. Here's another bridge. This is the last bridge right out here. I think we turned right after this. We were keeping our eyes on things out here because there are some known targets out this way in the inner harbor. And the bottom's pretty quiet out here. A couple of bumps here and there. A lot of boats over here on the right. You can see. All right. Then we come up on a shallow area as we turn inward. Oh yeah, that was an interesting spot I'm going to show you. So we wanted to find a tug called the Fearless that's on the bottom out here in this area. And that's what I think this is right here. I'm going to zoom it for you. Jerry Geyer mapped this many years ago. It's a fish tug that historically was abandoned out here, and he and I have both tried to figure out what it is. You can see it's really broken up due to many years of shoreline improvements. I'm going to show you one more view of it. I think I have it in track 42 here. Yeah, there it is. The seeing wasn't so hot right there. There was a lot of, the water was pretty rough. You can see we're bouncing around a little bit. And this is it again. The what we think are the remains of the tug Fearless, broken up on the bottom there. It's right underneath a pier for a restaurant. So it's pretty difficult to get close up to. And again, the seeing wasn't great right there. All right. That is the essentially all of the major features that we toured there. I'm going to go ahead and return to the screen here. I'm going to come back on camera. All right. So that is essentially what we saw, and I appreciate everybody sticking around and walking through this with me. My main purpose, as I said, is not just showing what's on the bottom, but recording the condition of the bottom of the Milwaukee River and any historical artifacts that may be down there, because these rivers do get dredged, and they do regentrification efforts change the shoreline, they change what's on the bottom, and if nobody ever records it or records the potential archaeological artifacts that are on the bottom, they'll just get removed. So hopefully these videos then will serve to do that. So Bob and I already shared this data with the State Historical Society in its raw data form, but having these uploaded now to YouTube and streamed on our channel helps record and preserve this information. So I appreciate everybody who stuck around. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in. I can see and I can answer them. Um, Bob and I also did um, the Milwaukee River, which we're going to do next week, Thursday night. So Dave asks a question: if there is any visibility in these rivers, or if they're mostly muddy. There is sometimes. These rivers aren't always real muddy, but they're never what I would call clear. People don't generally scuba dive them without, dry suits on, and then they shower off and really have to be careful what they get on their suits. People don't generally swim in them, although they're not dirty and they're not polluted. I would tell you that. A lot of the industrial pollutants are underneath the biological mat on the bottom, and they are kind of sealed down there, although it wouldn't take much to disturb them. Um, unless there's been a storm and there's a lot of rain or runoff, it isn't filthy. That's why you see a lot of kayakers and paddle boarders, stand-up paddle boarders on these rivers. They're not filthy, but the visibility, isn't what a scuba diver would want. Most people who want to look at these things would put a drop camera, like I say, down with the LED emitting diodes so that you could see in the low visibility. All right. Seeing no other questions, I want to thank everybody for joining me. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at Brendan at shipwreck.info. That's BRENDON at shipwreck.info. And if you're interested in this kind of work that we do through the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeology Association, please consider joining us. It's $20 a year. You can do so at wuaa.org. You'll get our monthly member update that tells you all about our different projects we have going on that you can participate in if you'd like. Projects like these scans that Bob and I do, or scuba diving projects where we go out and map a wreck. Or Bob and I are going to look for a historic tugboat up by Oshkosh on the Fox River this weekend to see if there's any remains there. So those are the kind of projects that we do. Consider joining WUA if those are the kind of things that interest you. All right, everybody. With that said, I'm going to sign off. Thank you again for joining me, and have a good evening. Good night.